So I'm David Clark, the National Clinical and Informatics Advisor for the NHS Talking Therapies Programme. And as you've heard from Tarek, the Wellcome Trust has recently funded the incorporation of that data set within OpenSAFELY with high-level permission from NHS England, and we look forward to working that up. So my job is to tell you a little bit about what the NHS Talking Therapies Programme is, and also illustrate the wonderment that will come from incorporating it in OpenSAFELY. But basically, it will revolutionise the treatment of common mental health problems, depression, and all the anxiety-related disorders, and it will also greatly illuminate the subtle relationships between mental and physical health. So that's me finished. What is the NHS Talking Therapies Programme? Many of you might know of it as IAPT. A minister recently changed its name, but that's what it used to be called. It's a public promise that if you are seen in those services, you will get an evidence base, that means NICE recommended psychological treatment for your particular mental health problem, that it will be delivered by people who are fully trained to deliver that therapy, and crucially, that the outcomes of your treatment will be monitored and publicly reported. And you can go on your mobile phone now and you can see the outcomes of all of the NHS Talking Therapy services in the country. Of course, that exercise in public transparency had a purpose, which is that we hope that collecting the data would allow us to learn more about how to more effectively deliver treatments. And the programme, which was started by the last Labour government, was based on sound clinical arguments, of course. It was on NICE recommendations, but crucially economic arguments jointly advanced by Lord Layard and myself. And basically it said it's the economy, stupid, or more simply that it won't cost you anything, because if we effectively deliver the treatments and get the outcomes we'd expect from NICE guidance, then we will save considerable amounts of money elsewhere in the NHS and also get people to participate more in the labour market. And those two things together will lead to a zero net cost. So how's it been progressing? It started in 2008, and we're now at a point where we treat 670,000 people every year, and we do get outcome data on 98.6% of that 670,000 people. It's unique worldwide. There is no other mental health data set so complete or so large. But as you can see on this graph, this is the recovery rates, full recovery from anxiety and depression. The red line is the promise I gave to Alan Johnson, that if we did it well, we should be able to get 50% of people to fully recover. But as you can see, when we started on the blue solid line, we were quite a long way below that. And if we hadn't been collecting outcome data on everyone, clinicians in the service would still be a long way below it, and clinicians would be blissfully ignorant of that point. However, about 85,000 patients every year in England who we could have got to fully recover would not be recovering. But because we had the data, we could look at variation in outcomes between different services, different ways of doing things, learn from it, and as you can see, it's been a progressive learning exercise, and since 2016 we've reached those targets. And also recent data linkages, one-off projects, has shown that the economic argument was correct. We've shown that treatment does lower people's subsequent hospital costs, inpatient and outpatients. They also, interestingly, have less adverse cardiovascular events over the next 3 years. And we've shown that people move into employment. So the data has been wonderful in improving mental health, but the data set is seriously underutilized. For researchers, you have to put in a DARS application, get a one-off download for a particular period of time, link it if you can to other data, and then use it for one purpose and one purpose only. If you're an analyst in government, you can get easier access, but there's no linkage. And none of this is transparent. There is no way of checking any of the analyses. It's not open science. For those of you who've been listening today, you can see both of those problems are completely removed by incorporation of the data set in OpenSAFELY. And there are many things that people will be able to discover from that incorporation. The first one, very much in line with the DASA review, is how effective are all the new digital therapies that we're bringing into the treatment. And of course, we can look at that in real-world massive data. There's no other way of doing it except through OpenSAFELY. Also, big question in psychotherapy, what works for whom? We've got a range of therapies, but for some people, some things work much better than others. You need massive data sets to work that out, but OpenSAFELY will help us do it. It turns out that it's not just the treatment you get, it's how the service is organized. We had a paper in the Lancet a few years ago showing that's equally important for getting good outcomes. But that will be much easier to understand with OpenSAFELY. And lastly, of course, because you've now got all of the continuous GP and HES and SUS data set, you can look at the long-term effects of NHS Talking Therapies service way down the line. And we've seen that we can reduce adverse cardiovascular events. There are many other physical things that one would want to look at, and also long-term effects on prescribing and other NHS activity. And of course, with OpenSAFELY, you can then take any trial of psychological interventions, put it in the OpenSAFELY record, and look for the next 40 years at the consequences in the GP record. So all I can say is I'm a late joiner of the OpenSAFELY club, but it seems to be one of the best clubs to be in, and lovely to see you all.